All right, AJ, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to do it.
Okay, great. Let's see. I asked you on your YouTube page if you wanted to come on the podcast, and I think I asked you 2 or 3 times. And then, out of nowhere, just a month later, I got this response from you, like, hey, great, it'd be cool. Could you please explain what went through your head when you saw the podcast request? And the reason I'm asking this is not to toot my own horn and flatter myself. It's because people from Suriname, because we're such a small country, we have this idea that people on YouTube are like these gods because we're so separated from them. But in your case, we just sent you a message and you were happy to respond. So it was actually pretty easy. Could you please explain what your thought process was when you saw the request?
Yeah, I love that question, Gregory, and I'm glad you asked. I forgot that is how it happened, but you're exactly right. And I feel like I owe you a bit of an apology because I would have responded the next day. And honestly, I'm on my YouTube channel reading the comments probably too often. And I respond to a lot of them just because I don't get a ton of them. I'm a smaller channel and I like to be interactive with folks. I didn't see your comment at any point. Maybe a month later when I did finally reply to you, I was in a different section on the YouTube platform where you can look at other analytics and likes and other comments as well. And I was scrolling through actually comments that YouTube had blocked as spam. Yours wasn't blocked as spam, but that's what I was looking at this time and scrolling through many old comments. And then I clicked on comments I have not replied to and looked at those, and I saw it on there as from a month ago. So I responded the very moment that I saw it because I thought it was a fun idea, and I apologize that didn't happen sooner. It's probably because I don't totally understand how YouTube shows me what the comments just posted onto my videos were. They're not. I know now that they don't all just go to that notification bell where I typically look for them at. So that's the reason why it took me about a month to get back to you.
All right. I just want people to... Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just generally I've noticed the same things, especially starting out. In the beginning, you see all the notifications, you check them immediately. But I can imagine growing up, I've seen it at other smaller channels that content creators like to engage with every comment. So probably you'll get to the point where you can't engage with all the comments, and
eventually,
it's gonna get harder. That's the goal.
Okay, great. So my excuse for this podcast basically is to find some way to get conversations with people abroad, because finance is such a niche topic that it's hard to find people in Suriname to talk to about. So if people are listening and you're interested in topics, just start a podcast, just send people random messages, and guaranteed you'll find some interesting people to talk to. All right, AJ, could your channel is focused mainly on financial education, I suppose, and your experience as a financial professional. Could you please start off and explain what is the CFA and what is the CFP? Because those are 2 degrees that you have.
Yeah, and I would adjust what you just said, Gregory, and say that my channel is actually really focused on the CFA and CFP specifically, and not so much other areas of financial education. Now, that's not ideal for me. One of the reasons I got into finance is because I'm very interested in educating as many people as possible on the very basics of finance. However, the basics of personal finance type videos do not perform well on my channel for whatever reason. And there are other very popular, only focused on personal finance content YouTube channels out there. I don't compete too well with those, but there are not that many CFA and CFP focused YouTube channels out there. So I compete very well, in my opinion, in that space.
Clarify if we're wrong. So you've done both?
Yeah.
You've passed both exams?
Right. After university, I did the CFA program in 3 years. And then I felt very lucky because the CFP program also, like I mentioned, is relevant in my work. The CFP program requires 2 years of formal education before you can take the exam. Now, some universities have built this relationship with the CFP board, and so the CFP board acknowledges those university programs as counting towards their 2 years of education requirements. My university did not. So for me to later earn the CFP, I would have had to go to basically night classes at a local college for 2 years, and then I could take the test. But the CFP board also recognizes a few other designations as qualifying prerequisites, and those are the CFA a PhD. So if you have a doctorate in anything, and I think maybe a master's in accounting. So because I had the CFA, I was able to skip 2 years of education requirements that I would have had to go through before sitting for the CFP exam, and I could just sit for the exam outright. So I studied for like 3 weeks. The CFP exam is far easier than the CFA exams. It's not an easy exam. The CFP exam is still difficult, but it is nowhere near as difficult as the CFA exam. So I studied for a few weeks and passed that. And so I feel really fortunate to be able to have gotten that designation with far less effort than I think a lot of people have to put into it. Not because I'm smarter than them, but because I already had the prerequisite that I got to skip the education requirements.
Speaking of applying to jobs, there's this really interesting story from your channel that I saw that during your internship, you sent about, was it 172 applications to potential companies? Like, that is crazy for someone from Suriname to see that, because let me just explain our side. Like, we have very little knowledge here in Suriname, and the really smart people, they usually leave to study abroad because they get grants from other governments to study over there because we're a poor country, but then they never come back, which means like the people that are left over here, they aren't usually the brightest of the bright, and then it isn't a very competitive labor market over here. But in the United States, it's really competitive, which means you actually have to do the work of interning for companies and sending 172 applications, which is crazy. Could you please explain like the amount of persistence and like mental stability to hear no? Like, I think it was 160 ones that declined or even didn't answer. Could you please explain that process?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked about that, Gregory. It definitely takes a lot of persistence, and I'm glad you asked because I get this question a lot on YouTube in comments on other videos, and I always refer folks back to I have a couple videos that describe this process. One is, I think, called How to Land an Internship in Finance, and the other might just be How to Land a Job in Finance. But it's not easy to get your foot in the door in these places. Even I went to a very highly rated undergraduate finance program, and all my friends and family had always said, "Oh, that's great, AJ, you're going to have a job so easy, you're going to have it easy." And I believe that for the first couple years of my college studies. That, you know, in the United States you go to college for 4 years, but in the third year and certainly the fourth year, I came to realize that it is not that easy to get a job, and it's still an extremely competitive market. So the strategy I used, and the strategy I tell many other people to use, is to make as many contacts as you possibly can, because there are definitely employers out there looking to hire. And no matter what you want to do, as long as it's something that is kind of a job that exists, as long as it's not like I want to be a professional like turtle race gambler or something, as long as it's something that is a skill that exists in the marketplace, there are companies out there who hire people doing that, and companies experience turnover, which means there are companies out there who are going to need to hire people to do those jobs. They're very difficult to find, and they're not always posted on websites. I know of a lot of companies myself who don't actively list job applications, but they would pick someone up if they found a good applicant. So that's what I would do. Of the 160 lines that I've mentioned, I still have saved on an Excel document on all these contacts I was making. Only about half of those were formal applications that were on company websites. I got 3 eventual offers from all that. One of them was from a formal application, but 2 were not. So these were not even job listings. These were just companies that I had done some look on Google, really reading online, and a little bit of word of mouth. And I said, hey, these companies seem to operate in the type of marketplace that I want to build a career in. I'm going to contact them. Phone calls, emails, and LinkedIn messages are the 3 ways to do it. Reach out to as many of them as you possibly can. And a side point, I think I discussed this in both of those videos, is another good way to find them is to find a geographic region where there are a lot of these similar firms, because typically firms operating in a similar business will be within a same 10-mile radius or something like that, and get on Google Maps and click down the street and look for other firms and businesses that may be a potential hire for you in the future. Find their business, Google the address, get an email, get a LinkedIn message, and contact as many people as you can saying, hey, this is how I can help your firm. What you say in the message is another conversation, but contact as many as possible. That's what I did, and that's what I tell a lot of other folks to do also.
Following up on these applications, after you got your foot in the door into one of them, and I want to reflect back to an earlier episode me and Greg did with a friend of us who's in Canada, also in investment banking, because he kind of, if I remember correctly, Greg, he got into the door by like going through an internship. During his internship period, he kind of just worked for free, basically. Got his got grinded down and showed what he could do within the organization. So from your experience during these applications, how much was weighted on the prior education you had? Because I assume you didn't have the CFA and CFP qualifications yet back then.
Neither of them. You're right.
Yeah. What differentiated you getting your foot in the door at your first offer? And did you change like jobs afterwards in between?
So I think the best answer for what can differentiate someone, and probably what differentiated me, is the type of information you include in the contact you make to them. So all these contacts I just mentioned, you want to do 2 or 3 things and that's it. You want it to be pretty short and sweet. You want to tell them what you do and how you can help them, and give them some type of ask, like, hey, can you please respond? Hey, can you whatever? That in and of itself is a differentiating factor, because a business owner or a hiring manager, they don't have a lot of time. And if they can read an email in 14 seconds that right away someone is telling them, I can solve a problem that exists for you in your business, in your life, there's going to be some interest from them, actually from maybe 10% of them to respond to you. But if you don't do those things, maybe 0% of them will respond to you. My very first internship, though, Diego, which was after my second year of university, I kind of cheated on that one. That was just a family friend contact that I had asked the gentleman, hey, can I intern for you? And he said yes. I interned for free. I didn't get paid all summer, but I didn't have to hustle to land that job. I kind of had the connections to get my foot in the door there. The following ones cared a little bit about that prior experience I had, but honestly, most of what I was doing was scanning papers, so it wasn't super helpful. They did like the university that I was attending. It's good to have a good brand name university on a resume, certainly, but it's not a requirement. I think even if you didn't have a great educational background or other internship experiences, and you do what I'm saying to do, you could land in a position that you'd be really happy in. You just might have to contact 200 or 300 people, where I only did 150.
You said from an early age you already knew you wanted to go into wealth management, because you were so dedicated to get your foot in the door that you sent 172 applications. When you're that young, you're kind of naive. You don't really know what the nitty-gritty looks like. What attracted you to wealth management and financial planning in general? And do you think you made the right choice? And as a bonus, I think, what other job do you think you would have taken had you not considered your current position?
There are 2 reasons I decided I wanted to be a financial advisor, and I was 13 years old at the time. My dad and I were reading a magazine, and it said the top 10 happiest, or the top 10 careers with the highest satisfaction, and financial advisor was number 1. And I said, hey, that sounds kind of interesting. And so within the week or a couple weeks, we had talked about buying a stock, and he kind of gave me the background on what it is when you buy a stock and how the financial markets grow over time. And within the next year, I had just gained a very small amount of information, but enough information about that to say, this is a way that people can build wealth very passively. It's not passive income like people talk about on YouTube, which involves like buying and flipping rental properties or something like that. It's passive. You put money in your 401k plan or Roth IRA or whatever else type of account. And regular people can utilize financial markets, which are mostly utilized by very wealthy institutions and individuals. So I really like the concept of helping people behave responsibly, in my opinion, in saving their money and investing to create a financial freedom for themselves later on in life. And that's why I like the career. I'm very happy I chose the career. Yes, I don't think I've ever thought about trying to switch industries or even switching jobs. So to answer your final question there, Gregory, I guess I could try to be like a professional video game streamer or something, but I'm relatively competitive video games, but not on a professional level by any means. So I don't know. I have a ton of interests. I mean, if I spent some time thinking about that question, I'd love to be a race car driver. I don't know if that would be realistic either. So honestly, I've never really considered other maybe what you would call viable careers outside of wealth management?